We're going to talk about roadblocks, because a lot of people feel like, well, I know what to eat, I just don't know how to stick to a diet. I just don't know how to deal with practical situations like being on the road a lot, or I don't know, maybe you are expected to join in, dinners for work and so on, and you feel like it would be weird to, stick to your own diet and such. We're going to talk about a few of those, give you a few examples of how to deal with them as well. We're going to talk about supplements. I'm going to run you guys through a list of some of the more common and popular supplements. I'm going to run you through, okay, how strong is the evidence that it actually works. And then we're going to talk a bit about the part about learning about nutrition. How do you know that you should follow someone and learn from them? And how do you know that they're not just some charlatan, trying to peddle their own supplements to you and such? Good. Any questions so far? I assume not, but
no.
Cool. Then we can get started. We're going to start first with the whole methods and diets thing. So we're going to run you guys through a few of them. I'm going to try to place them in context as much as possible. So I'm not going to judge outright this is right or this is wrong. I will try to talk about some benefits and drawbacks, some myths and so on, so that you can place it into your own context, see if you should be doing something or not, So we're going to start with intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is a bit of a broad term, and it basically refers to going by feel. Now, the problem with a lot of people is that their feeling over food, like what does your body need, is very distorted. And that has to do with a lot of factors. Sometimes it is psychological. So a simple example would be maybe you're very sad and that's why you eat more. That could be it. It could also be the opposite. You could also be very happy because you're at a party and you're very tempted to eat more. It's not that your body needs it. It's simply that the social surroundings or your mood dictates what you're trying to eat. So that means you need to work on restoring your connection to your body. That sounds a bit, spiritual, but it's not really the case. It's more about learning more about interoception. And interoception is basically feeling when you're hungry or not. Can you distinguish being hungry for just feeling like you can eat? Can you distinguish being hungry from, trying to cope with stress by eating? So that's like a prerequisite to actually be able to do intuitive eating. So what's a drawback? Well, it's pretty hard for a lot of people because there's going to be a lot of effort into actually learning how to do this. So that's the biggest drawback for a lot of people. Another drawback would be that you cannot be very accurate with this. So if you are a high-level athlete and you need to be very accurate with, your caloric intake and so on, intuitive eating to some extent might help, but it's just not going to be very accurate. If you're an athlete with a weight class, it also makes it a bit harder and so on. What's the benefit? Well, once you have actually gotten through that initial stage of, learning how to listen to your body and so on, in theory, you should be having a relatively relaxed relationship with food. You should not be stressing constantly because you can just focus on, what do you actually want to eat? What do you feel like eating? Being mildly conscious of are you doing this for fun or for coping with stress or because your body actually needs it? So my personal opinion is it is certainly good, but it is something you should probably do with good coaching and so on, and not just at random because you read somewhere that it's better than any other diet. Because strictly speaking, it is a diet because a diet is just it's basically the way you eat. But it's not a diet in the sense that you're supposed to do it temporarily. Intuitive eating, when done properly, is something you can do for the rest of your life, which is another benefit. So I would definitely recommend reading up on this one if you feel that you have a hard time dealing with food in general. Maybe you feel like you do not have a very good relationship with food, but you simply have a very hard time with figuring out how to do that. And you don't want to count your calories for the rest of your life. You don't want to cut out carbs for the rest of your life, and so on. So intuitive eating, biggest benefit might be that it is something you can do for life. It's sustainable when done properly. Questions on intuitive eating for now?
Nothing so far.
Just going to give you guys a few awkward silent seconds. See if someone has any specific questions about intuitive eating. For those that trained UnScared, there is a method I sometimes use with people, which is called the Vivo method. It comes from an education institute in the Netherlands. And it basically has intuitive eating as sort of a sort of basis for it. It does leave some interpretation, so you could combine it with something like, you know, being in a weight class for a competition or something like that. But if you're interested in that, just hit us up for private coaching and so on, and we can see if we can put you through that whole process. No questions?
No questions.
If it fits your macros. So where intuitive eating is more about going by feel and learning how to do that, if it fits your macros is kind of the opposite. It is very much about going by the numbers. If you're going to calculate how many calories you need, or rather make an estimate, because you never know exactly how much you need, you're going to calculate how many grams of protein you need and carbohydrates and fats. If you really want to do it well, you would also look at your micronutrients, you know, vitamins, minerals, but it's mostly focused on the macros. You know, that's why it's called if it fits your macros. So what we're trying to do with if it fits your macros is be very accurate. Downside, you are constantly measuring and calculating. If you really want to do it properly, you should be measuring every gram of peanut butter you're eating, which is a hassle. That's the downside. There are actually two very big benefits. One is you can be very accurate with what you do, so it gives you a lot of sense of control, and not just a sense of control, you're actually, assuming you're doing it right, you're actually better able to control your results in terms of fat loss, muscle gain, and so on. Another benefit is that it gives you a lot of insight into foods, because another drawback is it costs a lot of effort and time, especially at the beginning when you don't know exactly how much is in here, how much is in there. But the benefit is it gives you a lot of insight, because if you're forced for a month or 2 months to actually track everything you eat and calculate all the calories, you'll get a better insight of what is rich in protein, for example, and what is not. If it fits your macros, basically means making sure that you hit your macro targets. So if it says you need to eat 2,000 calories, you get to figure out how to do that as long as you hit 2,000 calories. You could stuff it with junk food, 2,000 calories of junk food, 2,000 calories of, you know, vegetables and fruits and protein-rich stuff. Strictly speaking, both could work, but for obvious reasons, making sure that at least 80–90% of what you eat is like classic healthy food is probably a good idea. One, so you can get your vitamins and your minerals and all the standard stuff and all your fibers. Two, because it also makes sure that it is more filling, because what we see with a lot of junk food, it doesn't fill you up very well. So especially people trying to lose weight. Yes, you could just fit your 2,000 calories with a few protein shakes and a lot of donuts. It's possible. Is it going to be good for you in the long run, either for health or for adherence? Probably not. Any questions on this so far? All right, so if it fits your macros, it's pretty popular, but it is fairly simple once you know how it works. So if you have some time left at the end, I'll just grab up a Word document and I will run you through how many calories are in carbs and in fats and give you a calculating example of how to use it for those that are interested. Just keep in mind that counting the calories is not that interesting. So you have a lot of coaches nowadays, they will write you out the calories and the fat requirements. Yeah, that's great, but you can do that in 5 minutes with Google. That's not what I consider nutrition coaching. That's just, you know, calculating someone's calories. The hard part is sticking to it in the long run and knowing exactly what to adjust for example, peak performance. But saying, hey, you need 2,000 calories and you need 80 grams of protein every day, that's not super interesting. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just not super complicated coaching, you know. Same with losing weight. It's not losing weight that's very hard. It's keeping it off that's very hard for most people, all right? Any questions on IFYM so far?
Nope.
Great. So again, guys, remind me at the end if you guys want to know more about how this works exactly. Let me know at the end and I'll run you guys through a calculation example. Clean eating. So the fun thing here is that nobody really agrees on what clean eating is. Clean eating generally refers to not eating junk food, but some people will say that bread is junk food as well. That doesn't fit in a clean eating diet. Other people will say, well, clean eating is fine. You should just eat clean 90% of the time. The other 10%, you can just eat junk food. So nobody really agrees on what clean eating as a lifestyle or as a diet means. So it makes it a bit hard. But as a general rule of thumb, clean eating usually refers to eating unprocessed foods. There's a big gray area here, of course, because, you know, bread is processed. So to what extent is it okay? I mean, if you have whole wheat bread, there's a lot of fiber in there, but it's still processed from grains, you know, from wheat. But if you take white bread, it's even more processed. So there's something like a sliding scale here, and no one seems to fully agree. But of course, you could put some guidelines out there for your own lifestyle in terms of clean eating. So what I usually tell people is, yes, it is probably beneficial to eat mostly unprocessed foods, but it doesn't mean you have to do like clean eating specifically, because it's a very hyped up term in recent years. But when it comes down to it, clean eating is not very different from what grandma taught us. It's really just, stop eating candy in between your meals, eat your vegetables and fruits every day. It's mostly standard stuff. I just gave it a fancy name nowadays. That's basically it. I assume there's not a lot of questions on clean eating, but no, I figured. Next one, keto. So what does keto mean? Keto is short for ketogenic. Ketogenic refers to your body producing ketones. When you have a very big shortage of carbohydrates in your body will produce more ketones. Ketones are basically an energy source in your body that your body produces because it feels like, oh no, I don't have enough carbohydrates to have my brain function, so I will make ketones instead. So any diet that is super low in carbohydrates is usually referred to as a keto diet. What does it do? Well, because there's no carbohydrates, your body will revert more to using fats as energy. This sounds very cool because people wanting to lose weight are now like, oh yeah, so that means I will burn more fat. Well, yes, but if you still eat more calories than you burn, it doesn't really matter. Because if you eat more calories than you burn, your body is just going to burn the fat from your food and not just from your body. Like the fat that's stored, that's usually what people want to lose. So a keto diet is no guarantee that you will lose fat. There's no guarantee that you will lose fat faster. So all the magic stuff about how insulin works and so on, it simply does not work that way. For one, because protein can also secrete insulin, which is the hormone that helps you store fat, but it's also a hormone that helps you build muscle. So it's not, some people say insulin is like something you need to avoid. It's not. Your body just needs a healthy balance of all those hormones. But the long story short in that is it does nothing magic for you in terms of fat loss or anything like that. The whole idea about, no carbohydrates means no insulin, so no insulin means no fat storage. We've seen for decades now, study after study, it just doesn't work that way. The reason why people think it works that way is because they look at the mechanism, and it sounds very plausible, and the mechanism is there. Yes, less carbohydrates means less insulin. But then they just extrapolate on that idea and then assume, oh, well, that means that I will burn more fat. Well, yes, but not necessarily body fat, which is what we've seen constantly. So why does keto usually work very well in the first week or so? Sometimes you hear people going onto a keto diet or even things that also induce ketosis, as we call it. We have things like fasting, water fasting, juice fasting, or all-around fasting where you just don't eat. Well, if you do not eat any carbohydrates, you will suddenly lose a lot of water weight because carbohydrates in your body stick to water. So every 1 gram of carbohydrates will hold 3 grams of water. So imagine that if you have a lot of carbohydrates in your body, for most people it's at least a few hundred grams, but sometimes up to 1 or 2 kilos. Well, that means you're going to lose a bunch of kilos, right? In the first few days, you often see people losing like several kilos, up to 5 kilos in a week. It's also very common. People are like, oh yeah, it's amazing, I lost weight. Yes, it's water weight, and as soon as you start eating like a normal person again, you're probably going to gain that water weight back. Is that a bad thing? Well, not necessarily. I mean, fast results can help you stay motivated, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to be very realistic about it and not feel like, oh, it's going great, and then 3 weeks later you're not losing weight and suddenly you're getting frustrated. Well, it probably means you're not in a caloric deficit. So that's one. Another benefit of keto is, especially in the short run, people tend to blunt their hunger, so they actually have less desire to eat. That is in part due to some metabolic changes in the body, because your body reverts to different pathways to actually process all the fats you're eating. Because on a keto diet, you're mostly eating things like meat and eggs and cheese and stuff like that. On the other hand, the downside is because you are so limited, because you're usually not allowed to eat any carbohydrates, no pasta, no bread, no sugar, no ice cream, no good stuff, no pizza, but also no oatmeal, for example. So it gets very boring. It's another reason why people start eating less, but it's also one of the reasons why the adherence is so low. The vast majority of people will lose more weight at the start compared to other diets, usually around a 3 kilo average difference off the top of my head. And guess what? The 3 kilo average is what people lose in water weight. And what do we see after 6 months? people start regaining weight on the keto diet, more so than other diets. Why? Because it is not sustainable. Most people are not able to stick to a keto diet for very long. So what happens afterwards? They bounce back up and they often end up heavier than they were when they started, which is basically the same, which happens with pretty much every diet. The only difference is with keto, it just starts a little faster. You kickstart the whole thing and you just fall back into the old habits again. So keto is not inherently wrong. It's actually used for children with epilepsy as well. So they have less heavy epileptic attacks. So that's in a medical setting. But for people in daily life, I'm not a big fan. Not that it's inherently wrong, but no carbs also means you have to cut out a lot of fruits. You have to be a bit more mindful with vegetables, depending on who you ask. Some people will say you can go keto, but you can eat as many vegetables as you want. Gets a bit hard because carrots, for example, are fairly carbohydrate rich, and you can easily get yourself out of ketosis that way if you eat lots of carrots, just so you can get filled up. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, but it does have its benefits, absolutely. Questions?
Yes. I understood your brain needs carbs to function. How does this go with keto?
Yeah, so the main form of glucose, the main form of fuel for glucose. Fuck, I forgot to record again.
Ik ben aan het recorden en jij ook.
Oh, awesome. Am I?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry guys. Glucose, which is carbohydrates in a broken down form, is the main form of fuel for your brain. That's true, but in the absence, your brain will have trouble functioning. That is exactly the reason why the body produces ketones, because ketones can also work as fuel for the brain. The reason that most other foods and nutrients are not able to be used so easily is because of what we call the blood-brain barrier. And glucose can go through the blood-brain barrier, and so can ketones. That is the reason why both ketones and glucose can be used as brain fuel. Cool. More questions?
No.
All right. So yeah, very good question. And well, your question's answer is basically the reason why ketosis exists. So some people say ketosis is way better than regular eating. Some people say they have more focus and more clarity, mental clarity. But the way it seems now, evolutionarily speaking, it is probably a survival mechanism for periods where you have less food to eat in general. Paleo. So paleo comes from the term Paleolithic, which refers to a period of time long time ago, when people ate very differently than what we do now. So if you look at the average diet nowadays, we usually eat relatively large amounts of grains. So that refers to corn in the US, wheat in the Netherlands as well, rice in most parts of Asia, and so on. So we've been eating grains since the dawn of mankind, as far as we know, but high consumption of grain is something that started around 12,000 years ago. That's when we started agriculture as we know it, or at least a very rudimentary version of it. And that is when we started eating more grains, because people, instead of being like nomadic tribes, they started settling. That's when they started farming and so on. So there is some suggestion that we have only had about 12,000 years to adapt to a grain diet, whereas we've been living for many more thousand years before that without grains or with low amounts of grains. So some people will say, well, 12,000 years is not enough to actually adapt to it, so grains are bad for us. In 2012, I think it was, there was a book called Wheat Belly, Broodbuik in Dutch, and it was a book that said that bread is very bad for you, wheat in particular. And there were a lot of arguments for that. One of them being that it damages the lining of the gut, the darmwand. So inside your bowels, it would damage it. It said something about making people eat more. And there was a bunch of stuff there. As far as I know, every single claim made in that book has been refuted. And it is a pretty ridiculous book in hindsight. And the writers were also not very keen on actually responding to the criticism, because they had no good, they had no good arguments back, basically. So is bread really bad? Well, that depends. Some people have weak gut lining or even something like Crohn's disease. Then yes, bread is very bad for you. But with healthy people, it should not be an issue. Some of the other things like phytic acid, we discussed that in session 1. Acetic acid is an anti-nutrient. It can attach itself to minerals, so you cannot take up the minerals anymore. That is 100% true. The thing is that, first of all, you usually do not ingest a lot of acetic acid, assuming that you have a varied diet. And two, your stomach can actually neutralize around 90% of all the acetic acid you get in. So again, the mechanism is true. It does exist, but in practice, it doesn't really matter at all. So paleo does a lot to avoid certain foods, mostly junk foods. Well, it kind of comes back to clean eating, but it also takes away some of the foods that can have some benefits. So bread in the Netherlands can be a nice source of fiber, assuming you eat whole wheat bread and not white bread. It is also a source of iodine in the Netherlands, because we basically have only two big sources of iodine in the Netherlands. They are seafood. Not everyone eats a lot of seafood. And bread, because we actually add iodine to the bread. That means that if you do not eat bread and you happen to not eat a lot of fish, so I don't like fish, for example, and a lot of people are vegetarian or even vegan, that means you risk an iodine deficiency. So yeah, the downside of paleo is you are there is a lot of stuff you're not eating, which means it's bad for adherence because you're restricting yourself. Most people don't stick to it for more than 6 months, certainly not for more than 2 years. It does have some good things though, because paleo emphasizes protein-rich foods and a lot of fruits and vegetables a lot. I mean, that's good, but you don't have to go paleo to do that. I mean, any decent diet can have a lot of fruits and vegetables. So again, is there anything wrong with paleo? Not inherently, but you take out a lot of variety in your food, which may in the long run be problematic. So is there any basis for if it's healthy? To some extent. For example, there was one study that was done in the Netherlands, I think, where they put people on a paleo diet and they actually saw their blood values improve. So you have something called biomarkers, which is things like how much fat is there in your blood and how are your average sugar levels and so on. When put on the paleo diet, they were not instructed to counter calories. They were instructed to simply eat following certain guidelines, like, don't eat bread and all that. And those people actually lost weight. Those people actually saw their blood markers improve. That's all great. But when they people actually looked at the contents of the paleo diet, like what those people actually ate, they saw that they automatically ate way less calories than they normally did. So paleo was a method to eat fewer calories. There was nothing magic about it. There was nothing about bread being bad. It was just a method to decrease the calories you take in. Just like with keto, you see people sometimes very successfully losing weight. Well, if you have less hunger in general, then obviously you're going to lose more weight. So that's not very surprising in general. So downsides, hard time to adhere to in the long run. You risk lack of variety. Benefits, you will automatically eat more vegetables and fruits and protein-rich foods, which is a good thing. And less junk food, obviously. Questions on this one?
Nope.
Cool. Go to the next one. Again, if you guys have questions on the previous ones, just send them in anyway. Oh, here's one that's probably going to rile up a few people. Vegetarian and vegan diets. So there is a bit of a gray area here because, of course, there's hardline vegan, which means no animal product at all, and a conscious effort to live cruelty-free, as it's sometimes referred to, which also means, don't wear leather, don't use the car unless absolutely necessary, or anything that's bad for the environment, and so on. On the other hand, you also have something called pescatarians, which is basically a vegetarian who still eats fish, but no other types of meat. Ovo-lacto-vegetarians, vegetarians who, that's what most people know as vegetarian, don't eat meat, but you still drink milk and eat eggs. So the short version of this whole thing is basically that a vegetarian or a vegan diet can be very healthy if you do it properly. Basically, there is nothing, especially as a vegetarian, it's not that hard actually. As a vegan, it gets a bit more complicated. It's possible to be healthy as a vegan. However, there is a significant chance if you're a vegan that you might have to supplement something, depending on how you eat. Eating vitamin B12, for example, that is something you normally only get from the bacteria that end up in the stomachs of animals. So that's why you get vitamin B12 mostly from animal products. But it's still possible to get it from non-animal products, mostly synthetic variation. They added into some meat replacements, for example. So it's certainly possible. It's just something you have to be a bit more mindful of. Because if you are a vegan, which means you do not eat fish, and you don't eat a lot of bread for whatever reason, then you might get into the iodine thing I mentioned earlier. Vitamin B12 is something you usually ingest less as a vegan, so it's also something you have to consider. Less meat also means lower iron intake, so you have to compensate that by eating more vegetables, possibly combining your vegetables with vitamin C for better uptake of iron, and so on. Your protein intake is usually lower if you don't think about it, but if you just take a protein shake here and there and make sure you eat lots of legumes, you know, like chickpeas and so on, lentils, you can be vegan and still be a very good athlete. There's tons of examples of people who are vegan and still very good athletes. Vegetarian, it's even easier because if you eat eggs and dairy and so on, there's usually not that big of an issue. All the vegetarians I've ever coached in nutrition had to be a bit more mindful about getting in their protein, but aside from that, there was usually nothing exceptional there. For vegans, it was different. I usually see them needing to take into account the protein thing more. The protein that comes from plants is usually lower quality, which means the biological availability is lower, which means that less of the protein is actually used in your body properly. So vegans also have a higher protein requirement, especially when it comes to sports, but for health as well. Usually the guideline is around 20% more protein than most other people. And I would be very strict about that if you're a serious athlete. If not, if you train like twice a week just for fun, for example, you probably don't have to be that strict about it. Another concern with vegetarians and especially vegans is that the proteins are also of a lesser quality because of the amino acid compilation inside. So proteins, they consist of amino acids. We have around 20, and all those amino acids, the building blocks of protein, as it's usually called, you need a bunch of all of those in specific amounts so you can properly, you know, rebuild your muscle, rebuild your hair, rebuild your skin, and so on. For plant proteins, they usually have only a few of these amino acids, whereas meat usually has a bunch of all 20 of them. Is that an issue? Well, if you have a varied diet, not really, because in the morning you might eat something, I don't know, with oatmeal, which has certain amino acids. In the evening, you'll eat something with, I don't know, rice or beans or whatever, and that has different amino acids, and you're good. Back in the day, people said, well, you have to eat rice and beans in one meal, so you get all those amino acids in one meal, because rice and beans, the amino acids complement each other. We know now that you don't have to be super strict about that. If you get them in one day, you're probably already good. So that's when it comes to deficiencies. Or is there any benefit to being vegetarian or vegan? Well, you can brag about it to other people, which is a very big benefit, obviously. Yeah, I used to be a vegetarian for like 7 years, so I'm allowed to say that. Other benefits, well, when it comes to health, we're not exactly sure because a lot of studies are conflicting. There was a very famous study done, a so-called China study, where they said, well, in areas in China where people eat less meat or no meat at all and less dairy and so on, those people live longer or are healthier, right? Then there was a book. Most people don't know the study, they know the book. The book, the China study, actually referenced the China study very little. The book was really just an essay that meat is bad and you need to go vegan. That's very black and white, that's what it boils down to. Unfortunately, there's a lot wrong with that book and the study. One example I read about was that the book, the China study, refers to a study among rats, where they saw that if rats got casein, casein is the protein we find in dairy, when they got casein, they got cancer. And the ones that did not get casein did not get cancer. So then the conclusion was drawn that a dairy protein causes cancer. There was just one little problem here. The ones that got casein, they lived way longer than the other rats. And then they developed cancer. Of course, if you live longer, there's a bigger chance you're going to develop cancer. But they did live longer. So yeah, the whole thing about it causing cancer doesn't really pan out very well here. And there's a whole bunch of those examples. On the other hand, there are certainly a lot of studies that suggest that refraining from eating meat may be beneficial, in particular red meat and in particular processed meat. So there's a lot of discussion on this because a a lot of studies are observational that are done. So that means you look at a bunch of people, let's say you have 1,000 or 10,000, you ask if they are vegetarian or vegan, and then you track them over a period of a certain time, and you see who gets cancer and who dies and who doesn't, and so on. So based on that, not all studies agree, but then you see fairly consistently that people who refrain from eating processed meat and red meat especially are generally healthier and live longer. The problem here is that there was one very big interventional study, it was like 50,000 people or something, and those people were actually consistently tracked, and they were actually instructed or chose to eat less or more meat, and they did not find any of the negative effects. So now the question is it the meat that caused the issue, or is it so that people who eat a lot of processed meats are already unhealthy in general? Because we know that people who eat a lot of red meat and processed meats often smoke more as well. So, and it's very hard to correct for those things. So right now, we're not really sure. It depends on who you ask. A lot of official groups like, Voedingscentrum in the Netherlands, even Harvard in the US, they said eating meat is bad, or they say either meat is bad or processed meat is bad. Right now, even though we're not entirely sure, because those criticisms that I just mentioned, no one has ever actually gone against those criticisms properly. So right now, I would put it as white meat is probably okay, assuming the rest of your diet is fine. Red meat, we're not really sure, but in small amounts, it's probably fine. Processed meats, we're not sure, but it's probably increases your risk of things like cancer and so on. So that's a very black and white way to put it, but that's, from what I've read, the most reliable way to look at it. Processed meats, probably bad. Red meat, we're not sure, but in small amounts, probably fine. White meat, probably not an issue, right? And as for dairy and eggs, we're fairly sure it's good for you. Large amounts of eggs have been linked to diabetes recently, but even that was still not very strong research, because they also found that those who ate a lot of eggs were also people who were heavily overweight. So they found the link between diabetes and eggs. Well, of course, if you're overweight, you have a bigger chance of diabetes. So another issue there. But that's the very black and white version. Yes, it may have some health benefits if you do it properly. And at the very least, at least you're, trying to do something to harm animals less. So ethically speaking, there's certainly something that can be said for it. But purely physically, we don't know yet. Probably, maybe some benefit. It's just not as clear-cut as a lot of people make it out to be. Questions on this? I know we have at least one vegan here looking at you, but maybe other people as well.
Nothing.
Nothing? Awesome. I'm just going to give you guys a few more awkward seconds. Super awkward here. All right, considering no questions, we'll go into the next one. Intermittent fasting. We've got into this one in last week's webinar, I think. Last week's webinar, we talked a bit about intermittent fasting. What is intermittent fasting? You don't eat for a certain period of time. So it could be 12 hours, 16 hours, or 20 hours. There's a lot of ways of doing it, so it's a bit hard to make one blanket statement over all of those variations. But as a general rule of thumb, for performance, spreading your protein intake over the day is probably a better idea than very long periods of fasting. And for health, we don't really know. It probably only works if intermittent fasting helps you lose excess weight. When that is the case, we have clearly seen that intermittent fasting has positive effects. We have seen it do a bunch of things like lowering the triglycerides in the blood, so it's like fat in your blood. We have seen it lowering average blood sugar levels and so on. So if it is a way that helps you lose weight, it is certainly fine. Intermittent fasting can easily be combined with basically anything we've seen here before. But the other part of the health aspect, so there's a whole bunch of metabolic changes in the body starts turning over more cells, it destroys more cells to make new ones. The mechanism is certainly there. We just don't know if it does anything, because when you put intermittent fasting against a regular a diet where you actually lose weight, suddenly the difference falls away and we see the same benefits in both diets. As for adherence, I don't know, because as far as I know, there's not a lot of studies on the adherence of intermittent fasting. But the comments I have seen, recently someone presented a study to me. It was a meta-analysis of a person who was very much in favor of intermittent fasting. But even they said, like, the biggest challenge, because they're convinced intermittent fasting is good for you, and they said that the biggest challenge to actually implement it is for people actually to stick to it. So even for them, it was a big concern. So it's even if it works exactly as advertised everywhere, we still don't know if it's actually a solution. You know, telling poor people that they should just work more and earn more money, it may solve it. It may be true, but it's not exactly a solution, right? And telling people who are smoking, like, hey, you just need to quit because it's bad for you. Well, it's not true. It's just not really a solution, you know, considering the fact that like 40% of the people in this country smoke. Apparently this hasn't worked yet. So we need to look further than what is good in theory. So yeah, intermittent fasting is a somewhat complicated subject. A lot of research has been done recently, but this is like the very, very short version of it. Question?
Yes. So which amino acids are the ones that you are most likely to have a deficit of as a vegetarian or vegan?
Well, it depends on your diet. So let me put a really simple example. If rice and beans have the opposite amino acids, eating lots of rice and no beans, or the other way around, will make you miss half of them. In general, especially for people who do sports, the ones that I know that you should probably worry about most are the BCAAs. So that is, let me think, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, I think, off the top of my head. I'd have to Google that, but I think those are the BCAAs. Those are the biggest issues. And why? It's because BCAAs trigger your body to synthesize more protein. So especially for athletes, but also for other people just for health. That is one that is more likely to be an issue. But again, if you have a proper varied diet and so on, it's probably not going to be an issue anymore. But if you do have problems eating a varied diet, BCAAs will probably be the first one I would look at. There may be other ones, but I would have to look that one up. More questions? No?
Nope.
See someone here.
Oh,
yeah.
It just came in. I'm sorry. Fasting and BCAAs, you said it was a bad idea, but then didn't mention why. Could you tell us why?
Yeah. So here's a very interesting one. BCAAs trigger protein synthesis. We know the mechanism exists, right? It's nothing really new. Especially leucine, which is one of the three, that triggers protein synthesis. So it makes more protein in your body. Or rather, it tells your body, make more protein. So that's a fact as far as we know. When you're fasting over a longer period of time, your body doesn't get any extra nutrients, so it will break down protein because it constantly does that. It tries to refresh the body, basically. It does it all the time, but it does not get the nutrients to actually build it up. So your net protein balance, or nitrogen balance, as we sometimes call it, you break down more than you build, right? So when you're fasting for a longer period of time, there's a bigger chance you lose muscle. Even if it's a small amount, people who do strength training, it's probably don't have to worry about it too much unless you're a very high level athlete. But that's a big of an issue. So what we used to say was, well, if BCAAs can trigger muscle protein synthesis, well, when you're fasted or when you're waking up, use BCAAs so you can counter the whole breakdown thing. That was the idea behind it. And if your body still decides to break down proteins, it will use the BCAAs first because it's very easy to transfer BCAAs as energy. It turns amino acids into sugar. So the body will then use the BCAAs instead of your protein in your body. That was the whole idea behind it, and that is why BCAAs used to be super popular, especially when people were trying to lose weight. They would eat less, so they would take BCAAs to prevent the muscle from getting destroyed. Also during cardio, you burn more muscle when you're doing super long bouts of cardio, like running a marathon. So if you had someone, maybe a bodybuilder who would do some cardio, they would use BCAAs to protect the muscle. So that's like the old way of thinking. Then suddenly we found out that BCAAs actually did not stop the muscle loss from happening at some point. And we saw some studies that said BCAAs are good, and those studies were mostly the studies that were funded by producers of BCAAs. And then we saw some of the more independent studies, and they did not find that same thing. Some even found a negative effect And one example, this was a rat study, by the way, so this is not one you could translate to humans straight away. They injected BCAAs into rats, and they found that when the rats did not get any nutrients, but they got the BCAAs injected, and then again, it's injected, not the same as with humans. I hope so. What they saw was that the rats actually have more muscle breakdown. So the reason that happens, that's the hypothesis anyway, is that if your body is being told, make more protein, but you don't have the nutrients for it, it's going to break down more protein somewhere else so you can actually build more protein. So what's the net result? Neutral or possibly negative. There was one other hypothesis, but I don't know a lot about that one. I haven't read about it much. That was that the BCAAs kind of block certain pathways that help protect your body from breaking down protein. But and the guy who said it was a very smart dude, but I have no idea how that exactly worked. That was very deep into the biochemistry. So BCAAs, I'm kind of going too fast here because we're going to talk about supplements later. But for BCAAs, for vegans who have trouble getting in enough BCAAs, it can be very helpful. For certain endurance athletes, it can be helpful because it also helps with hydration. But if you have a proper diet, you don't need them because you already get enough BCAAs. And if you do it in a fasted state, best case scenario is going to be neutral, but quite possibly it's going to be negative. So that's the reason why I usually say, don't take BCAAs unless your diet lacks them, like with some vegans. I hope it's a very long answer, but I hope it does answer your question.
Nothing else so far?
Nothing else. All right. If I was too unclear about the whole thing, let me know and I will give the answer again later, but try to be more concise. Cool. Any questions on these diets specifically in general? Because we're going to move on to the next part of the whole thing.
With intermittent fasting, does the body go in storage mode, like storing food as fat because it finally gets fuel when you eat, and it wants you to make sure you have fuel in emergencies?
All right, so this is very interesting. What you're referring to as storage mode is the idea that if you lack calories or lack food or you're fasting, that your body starts storing more fat to protect yourself from future famine. You can approach this question with knowledge from the first webinar. Your body cannot store fat if it does not get enough calories in, because it's all about the calorie balance. How much does your body actually ingest and digest, and how much do you expend? And there's of course a lot of factors in here. So even though the calorie balance itself is simple, there's a lot of stuff around it. But the basic gist is if you eat less, your body cannot store it, because where would your body then find the energy to function? So I've actually had it happen once. Someone asked me for nutrition advice. I said, well, even if I eat anything at all, I still gain weight. I've done it before, 800 calories a day, and I still gained weight. Well, first of all, you could be gaining water weight, because if you starve yourself, you're going to be stressed, and stress can cause water gain. That's one. Two, 800 calories, your body is going to need energy to actually function. Because otherwise you can't even stand, your organs can't even function, your brain can't even function. So that means that on top of those 800 calories you're actually eating, you need to get the food from somewhere. Or in intermittent fasting, during the fasting period, you need to get energy from somewhere. So your body is definitely going to burn fat. It is physically impossible for your body to store fat when it has a big caloric deficit. The only way it is possible is if your body would be burning through all your muscle and then somehow still storing fat. That would be very exceptional and almost impossible, although there are certain situations where it could be possible. If you have a very small caloric deficit and you're just lying on your back and not training at all, your body's going to lose muscle, then it may kind of be possible, but they're very, very highly specific situations. So in general, no, storage mode does not exist. Because if storage mode would exist, we would probably not have so many African children dying of starvation every single day. So that is probably the simplest, if a bit crude, example I can give. A lot of people die from hunger. That would not be possible if your body could simply store fat, right? So your body can only store fat if it gets enough fat into nutrition. I hope that answers your question. Probably could have been more concise about that, but again, guys, send a message if it was not clear. But yes, storage mode is a big myth. That's the short version. And if you're not sure how that works, simple physics. Energy does not appear out of nowhere. Energy cannot disappear into nowhere.
Nothing else.
Okay, cool. More questions about this before we move on? No. Cool. Hit us up with questions later anyway, guys. Normally there would be an assignment here. Why does this diet work or not work to lose weight? So then we would go back to this one, or I would put one or two other diets in front of you guys. Like, hey guys, this diet, you have to do this and that. Why do you think this diet would work, and why do you think this diet would not work? So I'm kind of testing you guys on how it works, if you've actually understood the principles behind it. There was a famous saying from, I don't know, it was a writer like Mark Twain or something, some American 19th century dude. And he said, like, there's countless methods, but if you understand the principles, you can master them all. And if you only know the method, you are limiting yourself. It's one reason why I think science is so important. Because if you know a method, that's great. What are you going to do if the method doesn't work for some reason? If you understand the principles, you can adjust, and it gives you options instead of sticking to one method, which may or may not have some unnecessary aspects to it. So yeah, we're not doing this assignment, but if you understood webinar 1, 2, and hopefully this one as well, you should have a somewhat decent grasp of how to approach certain diets and methods. Cicely looks like someone asked the question. Okay, nope. She didn't. Roadblocks. All right, so what we're going to talk about now is more about the psychological side of things, because in session 1 we talked a lot about physiology of things, and we talked about different diets, and we talked about some guidelines for being healthy and so on. But we've only very shortly touched upon how to stick to it. I mentioned in seminar 2, design your environment. Designing your environment refers to taking away the triggers that make you eat stuff you don't want to eat, or overeat or something like that. And making sure proper triggers are in place. So, I don't know, put like a fruit salad inside and take the cookies out of sight, or don't buy them at all. That way there's a bigger chance that you're going to eat a fruit salad instead of eating cookies, right? That's a super simple example, obviously. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you guys a bunch of roadblocks. And with roadblocks, I'm referring to things that make it harder for you to stick to a diet, to reach your goals in terms of nutrition and so on. We're going to talk through a few of them, and I'm going to try and give a few examples of things you could do to fix them or to cope with them. Some are going to be somewhat more extreme, which might be useful for, high-level athletes. And some are going to be very simple and require a fairly little effort. Obviously, you're going to have to decide for yourself, or find a coach. Here I am. Find a coach to actually discuss what is appropriate for you. First two, social eating and impact on social settings. I mentioned before, even though in session 1 we talked about physiology, it's not just about the physiology. It's not just that food is fuel. It has a very important social impact on our lives. There's a lot of cultural aspects to it. A simple example is that people tend to eat and drink more, drink alcohol as well, when they are with friends, for example. And it is a lot less common to drink when you're all by yourself. And all those things are very important to take into account. So when you're saying, well, I'm on a super strict diet, well, okay, sure. So then your best friend invites you for dinner, and the person cooked like a huge lasagna, and you hate throwing food away. So yeah, now you're there, like, was completely different from what you were intending to eat and so on. How do you deal with that? I once coached a guy who worked in something for Shell, oil company, had to make deals that went over like millions and millions of euros. So he always said, like, well, we would often have meetings, but we would not fix the deals in meetings. We would fix the deals afterwards, together with a few beers. So the people would go out afterwards, and that's where the actual deals were usually closed. He said, well, if I'm going to be weird there, if I'm going to not drink beer, that's going to be super weird. And it's really about your social standing there. If they like you, there's a very big chance you're going to get that deal. If they think you're an idiot, you're probably not going to get it. So as irrational as it may sound, as stupid as it may sound, that is the reality for some people. You have to deal with it somehow. So there was a more extreme example and a simpler example, but how do you deal with that? Well, it depends. So I'm going to give you guys a simple example. if you guys are planning a dinner, for example, you're going to go out to dinner somewhere, you're going to go to a restaurant. I mean, right now, Corona crisis, you're probably not. Under normal circumstances, you're going to eat somewhere in the center of Utrecht. We have a whole bunch of restaurants there. If you have any influence on where you're going to eat, well, then you're going to think, well, what would be nice to eat out with not too many calories? You could go to an Italian restaurant, eat lots of pasta, lasagna, pizza. That's going to be a lot of calories. Or you could say, well, I'm going to go to Gaucho's, the steakhouse, and you're going to eat steak and jacket potato, which is a lot of protein and way less calories. That's a super simple example, obviously. And to be fair, going out to dinner once is not a big deal. Even if you would eat an all-you-can-eat sushi stuff, that would probably be fine if it happens like once every month. But if you go out to eat like 4 times every week because of work, because of friends, whatever, then suddenly those things like deciding on what restaurant to go to can actually make a big impact, right? So that's a simple example. Decide beforehand what you're going to eat. Or another thing you could do is before you go to that barbecue, have a small meal like some protein and vegetables before you go there. So you're already filled up. And when you're actually at the barbecue, you're actually going to eat the things you value. So you're going to focus more on quality over quantity. So instead of eating all that French bread, maybe you're just going to stick with, I don't know, the best steak that they have there. So you can actually have both things. You're going to have fun at the barbecue. You're going to eat good food at the barbecue. But you're also going to make sure you have your protein and your vegetables and not overeat. Those are just 2 very simple examples of things that might sound like a hassle, but they're actually very simple. Because honestly, it's not that hard to think for 5 seconds. Well, what do I want to eat? And okay, find a restaurant that suits it. You know, it's simple. Question on this part so far? Because I know I usually get a lot of questions about the social setting.
Nothing.
Social settings are a bitch to combine with if it fits your macros, by the way. If it fits your macros, as always, you have to calculate everything. And if you're not sure what you eat beforehand, or you don't know how much fat the restaurant is using, that's usually a bit of an issue. So yeah, keep in mind, if you do not eat out that much, don't worry about it. But if you do eat out a lot, then you might want to start implementing some of those tricks. Compromise between optimal and personal preference. So optimal for fat loss, for your sport, for your health, and so on. And then there's personal preference. Because what if for your sport, you need to be super strict about your nutrition to get into the highest level, but you actually want to eat a lot more than you're supposed to? Then you have to find a compromise somehow. The tip for this one is actually not in the practical aspect so much as in its preparation. You need to be very mindful of what you want and what it takes to get there. If you say, well, I want to be the very best in powerlifting, for example, and they have weight classes in powerlifting, and you have trouble having a healthy relationship with food, and you somehow, I don't know, you're way heavier than you should be considering how strong you are, and you're more competitive if you weigh 10 kilos less. Okay, cool. But how much effort are you willing to put into that? Is your mind even in a proper place to think of being going into optimal stuff when you don't even have a proper relationship with food yet? So if you have troubles compromising optimal and personal preference, well, sometimes there are some practical things you can do. You know, if you need to eat more vegetables and fruits, make a list of vegetables and fruits you enjoy eating, buy those more often. It could be very simple. But it could also be there's something underlying. So you need to take a step back. Do not get caught up in, I want results now. I want to do that new hype diet. I read this book. I saw this YouTube video. Now I'm going to do this perfectly. No, take a step back and think of the long run for a bit. I know that's boring. I know that's not what you guys want to hear because everyone wants fast results and so on. But taking a step back instead of diving into it is sometimes a better idea before you end up 2 months later with no results and finding out, oh, this was actually not as great as YouTube said it was. Or 6 months later, you fall off the bandwagon and you regain all the weight you lost and so on, right? Domino foods. Domino foods are basically foods that you have a hard time taking one of. So example, Ben & Jerry's. You know, I don't know if you guys ever tried Ben & Jerry's and take one bite and then put away the rest. I don't know about you guys, but I can't do that. I don't think people can normally do that. A bag of chips, you know, nobody takes 1 or 2 chips. If you start with the bag, the whole bag needs to go down, right? That's how it is with most people. It certainly is with me. And that's fine. That's That's what we call domino food. Why do we keep eating? Well, some people say, well, it's all about sugar. Well, I'm fairly sure that if it was sugar, if it was a sugar addiction or something like that, it doesn't exist, by the way, like strictly speaking, in the literal sense of the word addiction. Sugar addiction does not exist. And if it would exist, people would, at some point, after not eating sugar for a few days, they would grab a pack of sugar and they would eat it by the spoonful, and they don't do that. Why don't they do that? Because domino food things, keep eating, that is something that has a lot of factors. So a few years back, there was a book called, I'm not sure what the name was, but it was about salt, sugar, fat. I think something like that was the name as well. But the combination of salt, sugar, and fat was what made us eat more. Well, imagine this. You have a glass and you put olive oil in it, right? You put a tablespoon of salt in the olive oil. You put 2 tablespoons of sugar in the olive oil. You mix it with a spoon and you drink it. Is there a big chance that you really want to keep drinking it? I mean, it's sugar, fat, and salt, the combination. Probably not. Why? Because there are more factors. There are a lot of triggers that make us eat. So like I said, the social setting. Then there's the taste, which certainly could be a combination of sugar, fat, and salt. It could also be other things like E621. It's monosodium glutamate, MSG, which also strengthens the flavor. It's a flavor enhancer. There is the texture, of course. Example, I really enjoy melted cheese over normal cheese a lot because of the texture, because physically there's not a lot that changes, like in terms of flavor. It's just the texture that makes it better. Temperature could be something. Some people hate certain dishes when it's cold. For example, pea soup, Dutch snack. I enjoy eating it cold, but some people only want to eat it when it's warm. So even temperature can be a factor in do you want to eat it or not. Just think of coffee. I mean, maybe people enjoy the taste of coffee, but as soon as it gets colder, they don't want to drink it anymore. So it's not just the taste. There's a lot more to it. Then there's the associations we have with food. Even the mouth feel, which is related to the texture, that also plays a role in it. So there's a lot of factors in there that make something a domino food. It also depends on the person. So a practical thing you can do is identify your domino foods and find replacements. The Nutrition Center, Voedingscentrum in Dutch, has something they call eetwissel. Eetwissel is a food switch, which is basically replace something not ideal with something that is more ideal. So for me, I really love cold stuff like ice cream, and instead of Ben & Jerry's, I either eat popsicles like water ice, or some of the lower calorie ice cream like Oppo and Breyers and Halo Top, for example. Those are just a few examples of things you can do when you know what your domino foods are. Because the thing with the domino food is once you start, you need a lot of willpower to stop. We know from research that the people with the most willpower are actually the ones that do not use it. Why? Because they're smart enough to design their environment. Designing your environment in terms of domino foods means don't buy the Ben & Jerry's, buy popsicles, so that when you're at home late at night and you feel like taking something sweet, you will take a few popsicles. Even if you take 5 of them, it's still going to be a lot less calories than when you're eating Ben & Jerry's. So again, a few examples. Any questions so far on any of these 4 points?
Nothing yet.
Cool. Just going to go to the next one. Late night hunger. So some people, me included, have the issue that late at night, especially when it's beyond bedtime. So normally, ideally, I sleep around 11, but I have a very bad habit of staying up a lot later than that, usually until 12, 12:30. And I noticed that when I do that, around 12, I usually tend to get very peckish and I want to eat more. Usually when this happens, it's also very hard to still that hunger, and I usually want to keep eating. So eating 1 cookie, for example, usually doesn't cut it for me. How do you fix this? Well, 1, get to bed in time. We also know that people who have irregular sleeping patterns or bad sleep quality have a harder time sticking to food because they're hungry more often, they have less willpower, they have less focus, and so on. So that's 1, fix your sleeping pattern and your daily rhythm. That's 1. The other one is if there's a certain period of time where you're getting more hungry and you start eating everything in sight, make sure you beat that. So if you know that every evening you go to sleep at 11, but you get hungry at 10, You get hungry at 10, so start eating something at 9:30, something you know that fills you up. It doesn't cause you to overeat. Instead of waiting until it's 10 p.m. and suddenly you're like, I need to eat everything, right? So beat the late night hunger. That's one. Also, some people, when they eat breakfast, they tend to eat less later in the day, but this depends on the person. If you normally eat breakfast and you certainly stop eating breakfast, there is a bigger chance that you'll overeat later in the day. It doesn't happen for everyone. It's something you'll have to find out through experimentation. But yeah, what you eat earlier in the day and how consistent you are with the timing of your meals also has a big impact. So whether you eat 3 times a day or 6 times a day, as long as you're consistent, that often helps as well. I think that was the last one. Oh yeah, traveling. Go back. Traveling is also a hard one. Sometimes you will have people who drive around the country all day to meet with people. You will have people who go to other countries, for example, for their work. The best thing you can do there is prepare. I'm not saying you should bring protein powder to other countries with you, because when you get to customs at the airport, it might be a bit awkward to explain why you have white powder in your bag. So I don't recommend that necessarily. But simple example, if you're going to the USA for 2 months, USA is well known for having large portions. It's common to eat outside the house a lot. Lots of junk food is cheap there and so on. But just a little bit of research in that, I'm talking about half an hour of Googling, will already fix all that for you. If you know that certain products are very affordable and more conducive to a healthy sports lifestyle, and if you know where to get it, suddenly you've solved the issue already. But yes, if you go unprepared to the USA and you suddenly end up at Cece's Pizza, you have like $8 unlimited pizza, it's amazing. Or you end up at Lin's, it's like a Chinese all-you-can-eat buffet, it's also $11, also amazing. I've been to both frequently. If all that stuff happens, yes, of course you are going to gain unwanted weight, skip out on your vegetables and so on. It's a matter of preparation. If you're going to go out driving throughout the country for your work every day, maybe you do meal prepping. Meal prepping is just simply on Sunday afternoon when you have time. You're going to prepare 2 meals, lots of portions, maybe like 7 total, so that for all the days afterwards, you can bring food with you instead of being reliant on, I don't know, whatever you find at the local gas station, right? So there's a few examples of roadblocks and how to deal with them. A lot of these things basically thrive on 2 things. 1, being conscious of it, and 2, preparing for it. What you want in general is to keep control. So prepare for things instead of letting them happen to you. Letting them happen to you is not necessarily a bad thing. People usually feel bad about it. That's 1. And 2, you don't get the results you initially planned for. So that sucks. So that's a few examples of roadblocks. I see multiple people had questions, I think.
Yep. First one was just a remark saying I've never had any problems bringing protein powder over the border, so that's good to know.
Good.
And then my biggest roadblock at the moment, due to the corona, is boredom and lack of structure due to working at home mainly. Any tips on preventing overeating? And then between the brackets, sweets.
Well, that depends on a lot of factors. If boredom is an issue, do stuff so you don't get bored. So for me, a simple example, if I have a video game that I really like, it's not as bad now, but back in the day when I was like, I don't know, 16 or something, if I had a video game I really liked, I would forget to eat. I eat a lot, way more than I should. I gained 20 kilos in a period of 1.5 years or something. But back in the day, I would actually forget to eat when I was playing video games because I was so into something. So my first thing, if someone says I'm bored, I'm like, go do something, find something to do inside the house in this case. If you can't go outside, you could read books, you could play video games, you can watch series. You're getting bored of it, play board games. You're getting bored of it, learn a new skill, go on Udemy or Coursera and find a course to do. You're all home by yourself, can't play board games, go play games online with friends, A lot of times the issue is not necessarily the boredom, like the boredom is the symptom, but the reason is that people are now pushed into a different rhythm than what they normally have. So instead of actually having a set time where you go out, where you go to your work, you have a break at work and so on, you're used to a certain rhythm. Right now, it's like every day is a lazy Sunday. Even if you're working, a lot of people still have issues with the proper timing. So that will require some discipline, but also some planning, because the more rigorous you are about planning things, the less discipline you need. If you have a day with nothing planned, you have this long to-do list, but you have nothing planned, obviously you're just going to do whatever. And maybe you get to work a bit, and at some point you feel like, well, I'm getting hungry, and you kind of forgot to eat at normal times. Like normally you lunch at 12, but you've been working until 1, so you're an hour late, so you're extra hungry, and then you start eating more, and then you start eating junk food. Well, if you're very structured about everything, I would say take control of that. Make sure you get up every day at the same time. It doesn't have to be super early. You don't have to get up at 5 if you don't have to go to work anyway. Get up at a certain time. Let it be 8 a.m., 9 a.m. for all I care. Have your breakfast, allot a certain period of time for work, lunch, allot a certain amount of time for, so on. Try to find a consistent rhythm, because the less structure you have, the more conscious choice you need to make, which costs more willpower and mental energy, the more things can actually come at you. Whereas if you plan for something and design your environment, there we have it again, then you have less choices to make, cost you less mental energy, you will automatically be steered into the right direction. So if right now you're eating all the sweets in the house at night because you're bored, don't buy sweets, right? Make sure you're not bored. Have something to do at a specific time frame even, right? Those things could stave off a lot of the issues. I've been helping a few people right now who have the same issue with eating. And I found that every single one of them simply lacked the structure and rhythm, because they had it way more before, because work gave them a rhythm. And now they don't have that rhythm anymore, so they have to find it themselves. I keep talking about the whole environment. Their environment changed. It got filled up with triggers to overeat, rather than triggers to not overeat, which you normally have. If you're in a meeting, you're less likely to overeat when you're actually, presenting and talking and all that. But when you're at home and you're working behind your laptop and you see foods, you see a jar of cookies right beside you, there's your trigger to eat. So again, design your environment and prepare for it. Especially if you're very conscious of when it happens. Are you bored at night? Are you bored in the afternoon? Okay, that's where you need to plan something. So very long story. Reason is simply that it depends on the person, because it's easier for me to give out this type of advice, but it's like shooting with a hill gun, and it's quite possible if out of everything I've said, you're like, yeah, nothing for that works for me for some reason. You need a proper coach if you really want to go into that a bit more. More questions on the roadblocks?
No, now's a good time to ask them, guys.
Yes, hit me up with more questions. Otherwise, we're going to go on to the next one. I think that's supplements. Supplements? All right. No questions.
Nothing.
Then it must be an amazing story. Good. So normally we would here talk about the assignment that we gave in session 2. What could you do to be healthier? We're not doing anything with that right now. If you want to know what you could do to be healthier, talk to your doctor, talk to a coach who knows what he's talking about, and so on. Supplements. No questions yet?
Nope.
And we're going to run you guys through a bunch of supplements. I'm just going to run you through some of the more common and well-known supplements, and we're going to talk a bit about do I recommend them, yes or no, or in specific situations, and so on. Protein supplements. There's a lot of protein supplements. You have powders, which are very well known, so you can make like protein shakes. There's protein bars. Nowadays, we have protein candy, protein cookies, protein pudding, basically anything you can think of. Protein bread. Recently had bread here, which was pretty tasty. It had more protein and less carbohydrates. Great. So there's a lot of protein supplements or food products with added protein and so on. Do you need them? You only need them if you're otherwise unable to eat enough protein for your goals, which could be health or survival even, and so on. But if you are able to do it, it could also be something that makes things more convenient. So for me, I am physically able to eat enough protein without resorting to supplements. Still, I occasionally eat protein bars because I think they're tasty. They're an easy way to get in enough protein. Because if I want to eat a peanut butter sandwich, it's not that much protein in there, some, but not that much, unless I eat a lot of it, which is too many calories, which I don't want. So if I take a protein bar and then a peanut butter sandwich, suddenly I have enough protein for my goals. Simple example. So you can use a protein shake as an addition to a protein poor meal, or any other way. Is there any downside to protein supplements? Well, the quality varies a lot. So there was one extreme example from Body and Fit Shop in the past in the Netherlands. some independent people put some money together to take like 8 different brands of protein powder, send it to a lab to see like, hey, how much protein is there really in there? There was way less protein in there than was advertised. I think the ad said like 80%, but it was only like 45%. So that was, you know, ethically questionable. Supposedly they fixed it, but that is certainly a thing. And then, of course, there's the actual obvious thing. I remember back in the past, I once saw Herbalife protein powder, and the Herbalife protein powder was like, I don't know, 45% protein. A decent protein powder, assuming you buy it for the protein, because that's why protein powder, should have at least 70 to 80%, and ideally around 90%. Why? Because otherwise you're just buying a bunch of filler products. If you're trying to get more protein, and what uses extra carbohydrates, you could have just eaten a sandwich to get those carbohydrates in. So make sure that if you take protein supplements, which is fine, take a look at which one you're taking. And also keep in mind that a lot of protein-rich products often have other things you may not want. So protein bars often have polyols, sugar alcohols. They're not inherently bad, but because the body does not digest them well, they can ferment in the lower part of your gut and can give you gas and stomach cramps and so on. We talked about this a bit in the first webinar. Polyols in small amounts are usually fine, but some people cannot take them at all. So keep that in mind when you take something like protein bars and protein candy and stuff. BCAAs, well, we went into that before, so I'm not going to repeat the whole thing, but long story short, very useful for some vegans, probably useful for most people, maybe useful for some endurance athletes, possibly has a negative effect when you're taking it in combination with fasting. Caffeine. After this, we'll take a short break for questions if necessary. Caffeine, we know it as something that's in coffee and in smaller amounts in tea and chocolate. Caffeine has a few main functions. There's something in our body called adenosine. Adenosine is something that makes you sleepy. The adenosine goes into certain places in your body to make you sleepy. Caffeine goes into its place, so the adenosine cannot attach itself, so then you don't get sleepy. That's the reason why caffeine can make you feel more alert. Even if you're used to caffeine, it can still work, although at some point you might need larger doses of caffeine, so more coffee. But it also has an effect on sports performance. We see that there is less fatigue, less pain, and I'm not talking about the bad pain of injury, but like pain from soreness and all that. It raises the body temperature a little bit. You burn a few more calories and so on. You usually see slightly better performance in the basically in CrossFit style training, so something that lasts a few minutes. The effect is there in explosive stuff as well, just not as much. Does it have any downsides? Well, yes. Caffeine, some people are very sensitive of it. Even if they don't notice it, it can still ruin the quality of their sleep, especially if you take it within 4 to 8 hours of sleeping. So I usually recommend don't take any caffeine, no coffee or chocolate or tea, especially coffee. Tea and chocolate are usually okay in small amounts, but don't take it in the 8 hours before sleep, ideally even longer before it, depending on how sensitive you are to it. Other downside is you get used to it, so the whole alertness thing stays. A lot of people who often drink coffee will know you wake up, you drink coffee, and suddenly you feel better. That's partially because of the adenosine story. It's also because you get addicted to it. The downside of being addicted, I don't know if any of you guys has ever tried to quit coffee after drinking it a lot. If you drink 5 cups of coffee a day, try to not drink coffee for 3 days, see how tired you get and how much of a headache you get. That's because you get super addicted. So at some point, it's just like with a cigarette. Some people say, yeah, smoking a cigarette relaxes me. Yes, it relaxes you because you are tired, because you're addicted and you get super tired and then cranky and you get the shakes and all that because you're addicted and not getting your fix. It's not because smoking inherently has a calming effect, maybe psychological, but otherwise it's just the addiction you're taking care of. So with caffeine, it's partially the same. Another downside is that although the alertness stays, the effect, what does not stay is the effect on performance. So as soon as you go over a certain amount of caffeine, at some point, the benefits for performance go away. So for most people, it's around 700 milligrams of caffeine per week. So that's around 7 solid cups of coffee. So that means if you drink 1 cup of coffee per day, It probably relates also to your body weight, although they don't have a solid formula for that yet, as far as I know. But if you drink more than 7 cups of coffee per week, especially if you're not super heavy, like I weigh 108 kilos, I could probably get away with a bit more. But if you weigh a lot less than 108 kilos, there's a big chance that if you take 7 cups of coffee or more per week, especially if you add in chocolate and tea, that you're not getting the benefits from performance. So what I would recommend, if you're not super attached to your coffee, get off the coffee, right? First of all, it's going to help improve quality of sleep and you're going to feel better and so on, because being reliant on caffeine and coffee to get through your day is not normal. Then you're just trying to compensate for fatigue. And I only use it when you have super heavy workouts or exceptional situations. And then you take between 200 and 400 milligrams of caffeine, depending on how heavy you are. There's a formula for that. I'll look that up for you guys if you need it. That was, I think it was 2 to 4 milligrams. So average 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So if I weigh 108, I need probably over 300 milligrams of caffeine to get a big effect on my training. So if I don't use caffeine at all, I have a heavy workout come up, I usually take 2 caffeine pills. It's super cheap and I don't like coffee, so it's great. I take 400 milligrams of caffeine and suddenly I blast through my workout. Great. I just shouldn't do that 2 times per week or more, because then the effect goes away and my body gets used to it. Other downside of caffeine, it can also mask your fatigue. Maybe you're feeling tired every single morning when you wake up, then you take coffee and you're like, oh, I feel great. Then you are masking your fatigue. You are not actually taking care of the fatigue. You're compensating for your lack of sleep or your lack of quality of sleep. Ideally, you should be able to get through your days without caffeine, but you can drink coffee because you enjoy it. Obviously, that's fine. Just don't kid yourself and think that you're doing fine while you're just really addicted to caffeine. All right. Questions about these 3 supplements?
Nope.
All right, that ligt aan ons zusjes.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Just going to give you guys, light. Just going to give you guys a second to ask any questions on these 3. Niente?
Niente.
Okay, next one, creatine. This is probably my favorite supplement. Why? Because it has been very well researched and it has been very well documented that creatine has a benefit. Some of which are very well documented and some of them are a bit experimental. What does creatine do? I'll go into the biochemistry part later on if you guys find it super interesting. But basically what it does is it makes sure that the energy in your body, ATP, for those that remember webinar 1 or who have some background in it, it basically makes sure that ATP gets reproduced faster. Why is that useful? It basically means you can do explosive stuff more often and faster in succession. So it's great for sprints, weightlifting, powerlifting, and so on. It also helps recovery to some extent between sets. So you can do more sets of the same thing. So it also works for CrossFit. It also helps with recovery of the muscles. It also holds some water inside your muscles. So you may gain a few 100 grams of weight. It's all water weight. It's just going to make your muscles look tighter. It's not even going to make you big or bulky. It's just going to make it look a bit tighter. So that's nice for anyone who cares about their looks enough. But there are also some slightly less documented effects. Some studies suggest that it has a positive impact on endurance, especially in terms of recovery. But as far as I know, that effect is very small. Another interesting effect that they have found is that creatine may have a positive effect on brain function, especially at a later age and with people who have had some sort of brain trauma, like after an accident. Now, of course, those are very specific populations, so it doesn't mean it goes for everyone. But worst case scenario, creatine monohydrate is like €5 per month to use it. That's very cheap for a supplement. And for all the benefits it has, this is the one supplement I recommend to pretty much everyone, except for people with kidney issues. If you have kidney issues, don't do it. Consult your doctor. And for people who just train recreatively for 2 times a week and just want to be healthy and don't want to think about it too much. And, you know, creatine is not going to make a big difference. But for those who are more performance oriented, like you actually want to set good times in your CrossFit workout, you want to lift more weight. This is 100% a great supplement to use. Make sure you use creatine monohydrate because you have several variations. Not all of them have been researched very well, and some of them may even not work as well. So creatine monohydrate is the cheapest, simplest form. Take 5 grams every day, ideally with a carbohydrate-rich meal. That's it. Is that a question?
We just got 1. 2. What brand of creatine supplements would you recommend?
Now, it depends, because creatine monohydrate is such a simple supplement. You don't have to worry too much about things like quality, assuming you have creatine monohydrate. But especially outside of the Netherlands, like in the USA, there is some concern about contamination of the supplements. So, and I know that Flindal is a brand in the Netherlands who tests very frequently to see if they don't have any weird contaminations. Contaminations are very important if you get tested in your sport. So in weightlifting, sometimes you get a doping test. And if you accidentally have a very small amount of something doping related, and it comes from a contaminated supplement, and man, screw you, it's your own responsibility. So if you want to be sure that you do not get caught for that, or you just don't want that shit in your body, which I fully understand, get it from Flindal or from powersupplements.nl. But Flindal is usually slightly more expensive, but we're talking about very small amounts of euros. So maybe it's €6 per month instead of €5 per month. I wouldn't worry about it. Flindal is great for that. I think Coach Sanne from UnScared actually has discount codes for Flindal on her Instagram page. So check that out.
Okay. I heard there was a link between creatine and hair loss. Do you know anything about it?
Yes, it is not true.
Well, that was easy. Okay. Amount of creatine based on weight. So if so, any rules of thumb? 5
grams per day for everyone. The reason is that it is probably weight reliant, but we don't know exactly how much. That's one. We don't have like a very solid rule for it. There are some guidelines, but we don't have a very reliable formula. And the reason for that is that not everyone absorbs and digests the creatine very well. So if for some reason people think they do not process it very well, take it with a large carbohydrate meal. So if you're eating pasta in the evening or you have a bread meal, that's probably when you should take your creatine, because that helps with the absorption of creatine. But assuming that you do that, so you take it with a carbohydrate-rich meal, and you take 5 grams a day, it's good for everyone. And if you take 5 grams a day, that's when you get down to the €5 per month, which is very doable. Taking smaller amounts may work if you're a lot lighter than average. But yeah, for such a small amount of money, I would not worry too much about it.
Okay, about creatine and water weight. I'm working on my diet and sports. My weight is my guide towards going well or going not well. How much water will I be carrying around constantly?
Depends on how much creatine you actually absorb. Depends on how much creatine you already have in your body. But we're usually talking about a few hundred grams, maybe up to a kilo. But honestly, if you're using weight as a major guideline, first of all, I would really recommend having more than one way to measure your progress. I really, really recommend it. And 2, never ever base something on a single measurement, but always measure and conclude based on trends. Because if your weight, let's say you want to lose weight and you consistently lose weight, and suddenly there's a 2 kilo spike, and then you start losing weight again the whole time. Why would you change anything? You had one spike. That could be creatine. It could be another diet change you made because you eat more salt, something like that. So always look at the trend. If you really want to do it properly, you look at the trend and not at a single measurement. Plus, I really recommend using multiple methods to measure. We can go into that later in the Q&A session. If you will have questions about how to measure proper fat loss and so on, you can take a look at that.
Is creatine also beneficial for endurance athletes? And do you need to pause your creatine intake every few weeks?
It may be beneficial for endurance athletes. We don't know yet, but it may help with proper recovery, especially if you have something like intervals. So if you're like a cyclist and you have to go uphill, that's when suddenly the power output goes up. That's when creatine would actually help with stuff like that. But if you're going at a consistent pace, like a marathon on flat terrain, it may help with recovery, but as far as I know, research is not that strong on that part. So you could do it. Again, it's only €5 per month. But if you feel like, well, I don't want to put anything in my body that I don't need, maybe not do it. As for the other question, do you need to get off creatine use? No, not really. People used to say like, well, you have to stop taking it for a week every 6 weeks because otherwise your body will produce less of it yourself. I'm like, well, it's fine, because if you keep using it for the rest of your life, it doesn't matter if your body down-regulates its own production. So no, you don't have to stop using it. Again, the only reason I can think of to consciously not take creatine is if you already have kidney issues, because creatine needs to be filtered through the kidneys. So with healthy people, that is 100% fine. Your kidneys can take a lot of abuse. But if you already have issues with it, you definitely want to talk to your doctor first.
That was it so far.
That was it. No questions. All right, next one. Glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM. I don't know the full name of MSM because nobody knows this, so don't bother. Glucosamine is something people take as a supplement to help their joints. In isolation, it usually doesn't do that much, but studies have found that when you combine the three, it may lower the pains in certain people who already had issues with the joints. Studies are inconclusive about whether it works when you don't have joint pains yet. You could use it preemptively. I use it occasionally. I did use it consistently for a while, but it kind of fell off the bandwagon. I just forgot to take it at some point. But when you already have issues from erosion to rheumatoid arthritis and so on, it can lower pain symptoms. So honestly, I'm not super convinced that it works very well, because pain is a very complicated subject. You know, there's a lot of factors, neurological and psychological, in there as well. But so far it seems that if you already have joint pains, taking the combination of these three may help. The glucosamine isolation probably doesn't help, regardless of the situation. So this is one of the maybes. Multivitamins and minerals, we went over this in session 1. If you lack something, first see if there's an underlying cause that you need to fix. If not, then supplement whatever you lack. That's basically the short version. You want to use stuff just to, you know, cover your bases. You could do it. There is some suggestion that it may have a negative effect, but we don't know exactly why that is. It's also possible that weak and frail and sick people take multivitamins and minerals more often, and that's why they die earlier than people who don't take it. So in general, you could do it. I don't see a lot of harm in it, as long as you do not overdose. Make sure you do not overdose anything. Some things are dosed very weirdly. With the best known example was a vitamin B6 overdose in some people. They got neurological damage from it because they simply thought, oh, well, if 1 is good, then 2 is probably better. And there are some health gurus, especially in the orthomolecular direction, that sometimes prescribe large amounts of vitamins and minerals to fix certain things from, well, I think I've actually read somewhere recently that there are people advising huge amounts of vitamin C against the coronavirus. It doesn't work, by the way. In theory, it may actually make it worse. But yeah, I would just recommend if you have a specific reason to take it, do it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't bother with it. Is there a question?
Yep. Is there a supplement to prevent cramps?
Well, it depends on the reason you have cramps. I assume it's referring to muscle cramps. I mean, if we're talking about muscle cramps, okay. So if it's muscle cramps, it depends on the reason, because it could be a bad hydration. So you're not drinking enough water. You got dehydrated after running out in the blazing sun. That's possible. It could be a shortage of magnesium. However, that is way more rare than people think. The first response of a lot of people is, oh, there's cramp, you need to take magnesium supplements. It is possible. It is certainly a possible factor. But a much more common factor is most likely sudden increases in volume and doing something you're not used to. So if you're not warming up properly, there is a slightly bigger chance of having a cramp. If you go from running 10 miles per week to running 40 miles a week, there is a bigger chance of getting cramps, or from doing new movements that you're not used to. Let's say you're not used to jumping and suddenly you do a lot of box jumps, there's a bigger chance of getting calf cramps. Why? Because the muscle is not accustomed to it, so you get cramps. So it is certainly possible that you have a shortage of magnesium, then magnesium supplements might help, but make sure to check those other possible causes as well, because otherwise you're just, you know, taking supplements for no reason. More questions?
No.
Cool. Beta-alanine. This is also an interesting one. I hate this one, but that has to do with my personal experience. So beta-alanine is a supplement that works as a buffer against the feeling of burning in your muscles. So you know how when you do lots of Bulgarian split squats, your legs start to burn, When you do lots of push-ups, your arms and chest start to burn. Beta-alanine postpones burning, basically. So what it does is it makes you able to do a few more reps. Or when you're on a bike, it allows you to go a bit harder for a slightly longer period of time. The effect is, of course, not super big, otherwise it would probably be doping. But there's certainly an effect. So it does for weightlifting. If you only do 3 repetitions, it's not going to do anything useful. If you're going to do lots of repetitions or anything where everything starts to burn, which is a lot of endurance sports, but especially CrossFit, beta-alanine is very good to take. There is one minor problem. Even though beta-alanine has no adverse health effects, it does give you a chance for tingling in the fingers and the face. I get a lot of tingling in the face. It is super uncomfortable. I hate it. It doesn't last very long. It just comes up and it stays for like 5 to 10 minutes or something. It's just super annoying. I remember messing with a certain athlete of mine training at UnScared. I'm not going to name any names. It was Enrico. So I was talking to him about supplements and like, hey, there's a supplement that's good for CrossFit. You want to try it? But he hadn't eaten in a while, like way before a workout. And it was after a workout. And I gave him slightly more than he was supposed to take. So I was like, okay, here you can try it and you can see how the side effect is, the tingling. So he takes it and he was getting dressed or something. And he comes by 5 minutes later. He's like, oh, I don't really feel anything. Oh, good. Well, you're probably not very sensitive to it. For me, a few grams, and I already get that, and I hate the feeling. So at some point, he was talking to some people, and before he was going to go away, he went to me, and his face was super red, and he was laughing. He's like, "Oh, make it stop. I can take it. It's too bad." I was like, "Okay, that was kind of mean, like empty stomach, and then taking a large dose, and not being used to it." Bottom line, beta-alanine, great for performance in CrossFit or anything that lasts longer than 15 to 20 seconds, continuous movement. But you might want to start with small doses and spreading the doses over the day to lessen the chance of the tingles. And maybe you're not very sensitive to it, and then you can just take it for like 5 grams a day. But if you are very sensitive to it, you might want to spread it out over very small doses 2 or 3 times a day, and you can prevent it. I'm too lazy to do it, plus I don't do CrossFit, so for me it doesn't really matter that much. But yeah, consider that one. It's also not super expensive.
The tingling is a nicer way to put it, because it feels like, when your foot goes to sleep, it feels like that, but then in your face and your hands. So yeah. I don't
have it in my hands, by the way. It really depends on the person. I don't have it in my face. The tingling only lasts for a very short time, but then suddenly my eyes start feeling very tired and I get the urge to rub my face. It's not harmful at all. It's just, if you're sensitive to it, it's just super annoying. And some people don't feel anything at all. Bless you. Cool. Fish oil. So the way it looks right now is people generally do not take in enough omega-3 fatty acids, which is one of the types of fat. We discussed that in session 1. Eating fish twice a week, fatty fish like salmon, is probably a good idea. But if you do not eat fish, or like me, you just don't like eating it, then you can take either omega-3 eggs, you can take flaxseed oil, you can take oil from certain algae, or you can get fish oil. Any of those things can help in getting more omega-3 fatty acids, which helps for brain function, which probably helps for joint health. They used to say it also helps for heart health, but a recent very big study suggested that it may not be the case. So for that, we don't really know. But if it's for joint and heart health, I still think that is reasonable. It may also have a positive effect on inflammation in the body. So inflammation is what happens when the body senses a threat, so it just sets out to, fix it. Fish oil has an anti-inflammatory effect, so it may help with that. It's not necessarily a good thing. You need inflammations to properly function. But for some people who have too much inflammation in the body, this may also help. There was even a suggestion that it may help with symptoms of depression and stuff like that, which is probably related to brain function. But those things are a bit uncertain in terms of science right now. Also, do not do stupid things like take a lot of fish oil. You only need a few grams per week. And I know I've seen recommendations going up to like 10 to 50 grams a day for some reason, and it's just ridiculous. It also has a, I call it in English, like a blood thinning effect. So if you already have pre-existing issues like a diabetes or something, you might want to check that with a doctor to see if that is an issue for you or not. Diabetics sometimes have a harder time healing from wounds. So if you have a wound and your blood flows faster than it normally does because it has a blood thinning effect, that might be problematic, right? Meal replacements. So you have a lot of meal replacements from like ModiFast and SlimFast. Basically what a meal replacement does is it gives you like a candy bar that has some added nutrients instead of a meal. So you automatically eat less than you normally do. There is nothing inherently wrong with it, even though you may miss out on some other nutrients and stuff. Again, refer to session 1 where we talked about bioactive compounds. We don't know exactly what compounds are in what food and how they work and so on. So meal replacements are not necessarily bad. You can have them in the form of shakes or candy bars or whatever. The issue is, how long are you going to do that? Are you going to do that for the rest of your life? If not, why not find something else that gives you the same results that is sustainable, right? It's going to leave you happy and with results in the long run. But it's not inherently bad to do it. Just it's no guarantee for actually having any results whatsoever. That's it. So I think that was the last one. Yes. Go back. Any questions on supplements? Any of these? Cecily, my dear assistant, tell me.
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet? All right, I think we have actually reached the end yet. Oh yeah, we're going in the science stuff. My favorite part. Nothing? All right, well, we have Q&A at the end. It's fine. Learning about nutrition. So this is about what I mentioned at the start. Like, hey guys, you want to learn more about this? I mean, obviously, yes, I can teach you guys some good stuff about it, but there is way more to learn, and there's a lot of people who are way smarter than I am. I mean, shocker, but it's true. If you really want to learn more about this, for example, for coaching other people, or just because you're interested in it, I can always refer you to a few good courses on this. But of course, if it's just about your personal results, you could always ask your private coach if you're training at UnScared. Private coaching is also available for people outside of UnScared, but then obviously you pay by the hour and so on. But if you do want some one-on-one coaching, that's obviously always possible. But I understand a lot of people want to learn more about themselves. So how do you do that? How do you know that you don't end up with some charlatan like Rob Wolf or certain websites like happyhealthy.nl and stuff like that? Because the worst thing, like for Rob Wolf, David Wolf is a very well-known guy. It's horrible. He's the guy who claimed that putting coffee up your butt can cure cancer. He literally claimed that. He sold it on his website. He also did a lot of other stuff. But then there's people like the happyhealth.nl thing and healthylife.nl I mentioned. They are websites who they actually have very good stuff like 50% of the time. And the other 50% that's usually like pseudoscience. They often don't know exactly which half of pseudoscience and which half is good. The problem is they're using it to sell their own products, which I think is ethically questionable. How do you actually discern those from people who actually are putting out useful stuff? Because of course, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make money out of it. A few things here. Why does science keep changing its mind? Maybe you feel like, or you've heard other people say like, well, 10 years ago they said this, and now they say that, and 10 years from now they're going to say something else. There's one big reason. There's several reasons, but there's one big reason. And the main reason is something we refer to as progressive insight. Studies are getting better and better. When a study is done, other people need to look at those studies and see what's wrong with the study. They need to do more studies to see if they can replicate the results, because if they do one study, maybe they made a mistake somewhere in the study. Maybe this study was fraudulent. Maybe you have a company paying for a study, so the study is super biased. You know, that happens. I mean, there's a lot of companies trying to make money. So even if they're not literally lying, they're obviously trying to lobby for things. It doesn't have to be problematic, because if companies would not pay for studies, we would have a lot less studies going around. But people and scientists and everyone in general needs to keep each other sharp to make sure we don't get any bullshit there. So sometimes we will have bad studies, but it's the best we have. So we have advice based on that. And then over time we get new studies and we find, well, it was actually more nuanced. So back in the 90s, fat was bad, especially saturated fat. Nowadays we say, well, saturated fat has its function. Maybe it's not as bad as we thought. Some people take that to the extreme and say saturated fat is good and eat lots of it. It's kind of taking it to the other extreme. But that's one reason why science keeps changing its mind, combined with the fact that a lot of journalists tend to exaggerate things. Also, by the way, the scientists themselves, they may sometimes bring out conclusions that are very outrageous so they can get more prestige. But it's also the journalists themselves, of course, with cool headlines. So we have the Dutch news website, nu.nl. On the Dutch news website, I remember this was years back, there was a headline that chocolate is a superfood. So of course everyone loves hearing that, and everyone's like, oh yeah, chocolate is a superfood, this is amazing, great. But the nuanced story was that chocolate has a cocoa has a relatively high ORAC value. The ORAC value refers to antioxidants. Antioxidants are something that is useful in your body in the right amounts. So basically, the whole thing about chocolate as a superfood was probably better described as chocolate has a compound inside it that has some benefits for your health. That doesn't sound very cool as a headline. So that's another reason why some people say, oh, chocolate is good for you, and other people say, no, chocolate is bad for you. Well, the other side is chocolate is very calorie rich, and it's a domino food for some people. So things are often not very black and white. So if someone puts things down very black and white and has no way to answer for it, there is a big chance that he doesn't really know how it works, or that is not true. It's not always the case, of course. It's just a chance that there is. So keep those things in mind. Things are not always black and white. How to spot deceit? Well, there's a few red flags that always make me very wary of some people. Red flag number one is if people are censoring others. If I ask you a question on social media, someone makes a claim like, I don't know, spinach makes you build more muscle, and I say, hey, where did you learn that? Where did you find that? And the person deletes my post or something like that, then that's usually not a good sign. So censoring, answering for their claims. If people do not want to answer for their claims, I mean, not having the time for it, I can get behind that. But if people, there was one example of a certain dude, he got some questions from people who were skeptical about his method, asked about studies, and all he did was call them names and say that they were doping users, and he did not actually debate the content. If people behave like that, one, it's very rude, obviously, but it also makes me think that, well, maybe he doesn't know as well what he's talking about. That's another thing. So those are two of my biggest red flags. And also if people put down very black and white statements, especially when they're actively trying to be controversial. There's nothing wrong with being controversial because sometimes you just disagree with what the masses think. That's fine. But if you are controversial because you're trying to sell something, because you're trying to gain prestige, that's when you get a bit wary of things. People usually have three reasons why they do something. In this line of work, when they're talking about nutrition, it could be conviction. They're convinced that whatever they're doing is going to make people healthier. Could be money, so that's also something to consider. What was the other one? Oh yeah, prestige, of course. Sometimes you have people saying, well, this doctor exposed the whole big pharma, the industry. He wrote this book about how everything is all corrupt and so on. Like, okay, is that doctor actually like giving his book out for free, or is he actually getting money from it? Then it might just be prestige and conviction and money and all those things together. That makes the person no better than big pharma, because maybe whatever he's saying is actually a lie, which is possible, because if big pharma can lie, which they have certainly done in some cases, why can that specific doctor who exposes the whole industry, why can that person not lie? So yeah, have an open mind, but not so open that your mind falls out. Don't listen to just anyone, but at the same time be healthily skeptical towards people. And again, that's why we need science. Science is not a bunch of men in white lab coats trying to decide for everyone what's good or not. It is a system. The white men in lab coats, they can be wrong, but the system is in place so that we can get as close to the truth as possible, right? And if someone disagrees with that, then personally, I am also very wary of that person. I mean, you can be very skeptical towards the people in lab coats, but the system is very fail-safe. It's actually the reason why you guys are able to listen to me over your laptop or phone, because that's based on the exact same science and physics. It's why you can drive your car and so on, right? Oh yeah, the appeal to authority. You're going to need it. The appeal to authority is that you're actually that you believe something or you claim something because someone else says it. It's considered a fallacy because the fact that my mom says that spinach is healthy is no guarantee that spinach is healthy, right? You cannot know everything and understand everything in every line of that is fine. The same with nutrition. You're going to have to find reliable sources and base your knowledge on that. Could be an education, but an education could be wrong, obviously. A simple example, one of my favorite subjects in physics. I'm by no means a physicist, but I really love the subject. One of my favorite things there is that the claim that gravity influences time. So maybe you guys have seen the movie Interstellar, which is where they actually go very much in depth on that. They kind of use it as a plot point. But the principle is that if there is a lot of gravity somewhere, so the closer you are to Earth, for example, the more gravity there is there, the slower time goes. That sounds super absurd, because that means that where we are now, time goes slower than if you would fly up into the air for 10 miles and be there. Time would go faster there. That seems very absurd, right? I mean, usually when we're in the course, I ask people, like, hey, I just put the claim down there and say, hey, who of you guys believes that? And it was like, I don't know. And then you have one or two awkward people like, yeah, I think it's true. Or some people say, no, you just made that up. Well, we know this to be true. We've experimentally verified this actually, because satellites that are like 50 miles or more in the air, they need to be adjusted once every so many years for like half a second or something. It's like a super small effect, obviously. But the effect is there. Now, are you guys going to believe me when I'm telling you this? Well, whether it's yes or no, it's still going to be an appeal to authority. You're going to believe it because I say it, or you're not going to believe it because you think I'm trying to bullshit you. This is completely normal because I don't expect every single one of you guys to grab a physics book and see if it's true or not. And it's the same with nutrition, it's the same with training and so on. So the best advice I can give you in this thing is find a proper source, learn from this source, question this source, and make that your mainstay of education, right? This is of course a short summary because there's way more to it than this, but I hope this train of thought, this way of approaching the subject will help you guys in learning more. I think that's actually this, yeah. So that brings me to this awesome quote from Richard Feynman. There. Richard Feynman is one of the most famous physicists of the 20th century, won Nobel Prize, and was a famous science communicator, able to explain elaborate concepts to laymen like me as well. Wrote a lot of good books, and this is one of my favorite quotes of him. Pass on accumulated wisdom plus the wisdom that it may not be wisdom. So that means learn, teach what you have learned, but also teach to other people that you may be wrong. So that is also what I am doing. That's why I want you guys to be skeptical of me as well, because some of the things I have learned may be wrong, and we may find out that I'm wrong in 10 years from now. I mentioned in webinar 2 that right now, it seems like GMOs are not necessarily bad for us, but it's quite possible that in 20 years from now, we're going to find out that in the long run, it increases the risk of cancer. We just don't know it yet. So yeah, the wisdom that it may not be wisdom is also important. And the part after it, science contains within itself the lesson of the danger of belief in the infallibility of the greatest teachers of the preceding generation. Basically what that means is that if you simply believe in people and take everything at face value, and believe that they cannot do any wrong, you're going to be in for a big surprise when at some point they are wrong. And we see that with the simple example of the saturated fats that I mentioned. We think that certain groups, certain organizations, certain people know it all and are 100% correct. So everyone starts, avoiding saturated fat because they want to be healthy. And then we find out that suddenly it's not true. We have to be mindful of that. Why? So that we do not fall into extremes. So for example, the whole wheat belly thing, broodbuik, suddenly bread was bad and people started banning bread. The reason this was of course very isolated situations. There were people who cut out so many foods that actually got deficiencies because they cut out the bread and they would not eat meat and they would eat raw food as much as possible. And they were so going into extremes, and instead of trying to, be level-headed about it and being like, this is bad and good, and that got them a lot of issues. We even know that people who think in good and bad food have a greater risk of having an unhealthy relationship with food. Whereas people who say like, well, this is functional and it's less functional, but it's still okay to take it. People who are more relaxed about it usually are less stressed about it, have less issues with food. So yeah, long story short, don't always trust the scientist or the guru, but trust the science, trust the system. That's probably the short version of it. So Q&A. A lot of information coming at you guys over the last 3 sessions. So yeah, hit me up with any questions you have right now. I'm still going to be here for at least 10 minutes or so if necessary. And obviously, ask your private coach for more coaching and nutrition if you need. And for those who missed session 1 and 2, session 1 is up. Email me at jeremy@unscaredcrossfit.com if you missed it, and I will send you the link. Session 2, I forgot to record, so we're redoing that this Saturday at 3. The link will come in the daily fitness posts from UnScared. And this one, well, you're here. Ask questions if you wish.
Okay, we have a question, which is, to keep learning, what do you think of the work of Lyle McDonald or Layne Norton?
What do I think of Lyle McDonald? Lyle has put out a lot of great stuff, technically. The problem with Lyle McDonald is that he's an enormous asshole. It has a story, the guy has bipolar disorder. So I have seen a lot of situations online where people asked him a question and he would like call them out and be a complete asshole to them. But at the same time, he's also put out a lot of good information. I'm still dying to read his book on birth control and training. Supposedly it's a really good book. In the past, even though in terms of practical stuff, it was not always very solid. Like technically it was super solid. It was just not very doable for a lot of people. He had like the cyclical ketogenic diet where you would have like high carb and low carb days, and it was very detailed combined with training. It was a lot of effort for not a lot of results, even though technically it was all correct. So yeah, he does a lot of great stuff. Layne Norton, I know less about him. From what I've seen recently, he put out a lot of great stuff, but in the past he has put out on some questionable stuff, like pseudoscientific stuff, but that was like years and years back, and everything I've seen from him recently was actually really good. So I think Layne Norton is very science-based and not very sensitive to pseudoscience anymore, which would be very good, because being scientific also means that you need to be able to change your mind over things when someone proves you wrong. And I think that is what Layne Norton did. So I don't know exactly, because I haven't read a lot from him recently. From what I've seen, yeah, the guy's legit.
No other questions so far. This is the chance, guys. Yes. Are you known with the strong fit nutrition principles, and what is your opinion on it? The whole eating protein on only in the evening, etc.
Yeah, I would have hoped that this one didn't come up. I'm still going to try to answer your question though. I am familiar with some of the nutrition principles, not all of them. The thing is, it is very experimental. Some of the things are based in conjecture. So that means that they have a hypothesis, they test it, they see results, so they assume it is true because they understand the mechanism. The thing is, because they do not actually go through scientific studies, they do not take all other factors into account. A simple example. Let's say that StrongFit has 1,000 people that have good results with their StrongFit nutrition principles. Great. So does Sonia Bakker. So does Atkins diet. So does every other diet. That does not make it unique. That's one. Two, there's survivorship bias. So that means that if they had 1,000 people who had good results, maybe there were 10,000 more people who did the same protocol but did not get results. And you often don't hear from them. So that also makes it a bit iffy. Now, content-wise, I don't know how science-based it is, because they do a lot of experimental stuff that hasn't been directly researched. We do know that eating protein throughout the day gives more muscle mass in the long run. That's pretty consistent in terms of results in studies. So I do not agree with only eating protein in the evening. There are some other things, however, that they do that are less well known, but that are certainly true. So one of the things is that in StrongFit, they mentioned that the taste of sweetness activates the nervous system and makes you perform better. That is true, and they actually tested that with both runners and cyclists, where if they had water, sugar water, water with sweetener, water where they actually swallowed the sugar water or when they spat it out, that even tasting the water with sweetener or taking sugar in water into your mouth and spitting it out would already help improve performance, even if, of course, sugar is not really absorbed in your mouth. Not at all, or almost not at all, not sure. And even water is only mildly absorbed in the mouth. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. There's also a lot of experimental stuff that has not been proven. And there's a few things that I'm very skeptical about, like the protein thing. So yeah, I'm currently not a big fan. And I've talked to Julien about this, and he already mentioned like he's okay with it. He doesn't need the studies. He wants to be out in the frontier. He wants to find out new things, and he wants to leave the scientific studies to the scientists. So yeah, it's fine. He just wants to explore new stuff and see how that goes. I'm cool with that. I think that's cool because that's what we need to see progress. We need innovation. However, I have responsibility to my clients and to my athletes to do the things that I know will work properly and that have been scientifically backed. So I'm sticking with what I know from science, and I might experiment a little bit, but my clients are not paying me to experiment. My clients are paying me for results, you know, in the long term. My only big qualm with the nutrition protocol is the adherence. I am very skeptical of the adherence because there are so many rules you need to incorporate. So I doubt that a lot of people can do it for longer than 2 years or something, or even the 6-month thing. And sometimes there's people who can stick to it, but they're often the exception. You have to keep in mind that the fact you guys are here in the seminar makes you the exception because you guys are here. There's a few thousand CrossFitters in the Netherlands. There's a bunch of people, bodybuilders and so on. All those people together, even if there are 1 million people, there's still 14 million people who are not watching the seminar or go to a dietitian and so on. So it's great that we say like, well, I know 5 people who have gotten great results with the StrongFit protocol or with paleo. Like, great, another 1,000 people have, but another 7 billion do not. So what's your point, right? So yeah, that's a long story of my opinion on it. Next question, Cecily.
If you're tracking your calories
you're missing one.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had to ask them in exact order.
No,
wow. Okay.
I figured you were forgetting it.
Not being good enough. In your opinion, does reverse dieting exist? And if so, at which point should one start the process of returning calories to the diet?
Does reverse dieting exist? Well, yes, it exists because a lot of people do it. So yes, it exists. The question we probably should be answering is it useful? So reverse dieting means that when you're dieting, you eat less and less calories, and at some point you lose weight, and you reach your goal weight. Then you can either eat normally, or you can say, well, you're gonna reverse diet. So you're gonna eat 100 calories more until you reach how many calories you burn and so on. There are all ways of doing it. Is reverse dieting, so that's the slow buildup of calories, is that useful? I don't really see a use in it. The whole idea is that you can like stabilize hormonally and so on. I don't usually recommend it, and the reason is, I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to give you an example of why I think reverse dieting is probably not ideal. Share screen. All right, you should be seeing my notepad now. Imagine, normally you eat 3,000 calories in a day, right? You want to lose weight, so you eat 2,000 calories in a day. So you start losing weight, But also the amount of calories you burn in a day goes down. That's normal because you have less body mass and you move around less and all that sort of stuff. So normally you burn 3,000 calories. Now you burn only 2,500 calories. Now, at some point I reached my goal weight. I lost 10 kilos. I'm happy. Now I want to go back to maintenance. So I want to eat those 2,500 calories that we see here, right? So what I could do is I go from 2,000, I go to 2,100, and the week after 2,200, and 2,300, and 2,400, and 2,500, right? That's reverse dieting. Alternative is I go from 2,000 to 2,500 straight away. Now, I don't know why you would want to do reverse dieting, because what does that mean? It means that you are still in a caloric deficit for another 5 weeks in this case. So you want to go to maintenance, but you're actually not going to maintenance for 5 weeks, right? So I'm not a big fan of it. I would rather just see you go straight to maintenance and done. The only benefit of doing this method is that you can slowly gauge your weight so you don't accidentally go up too much. Because maybe you don't burn 2,500, you actually burned 300. Now you're accidentally 200 calories above your maintenance. If you're super afraid of that, first of all, you probably need to talk to a good coach or a psychologist, because if you're worried about eating 200 calories too much, there might be an issue, unless you're like a competitive bodybuilder or something. But I wouldn't worry about that too much, especially since your maintenance is going to go up at some point when you eat more. But yeah, I know some people are a big fan of reverse dieting because it's more careful. I'm not a big fan of this for the reasons mentioned before. If that was unclear, just let me know. More questions?
Yes. If you're tracking your calories, and if it fits your macros.
Yes.
What is the protein you need in a day in percentage?
In percentage? Well, why would you want to do it in percentage? Because if you do it in percentage, it means that if you're trying to gain weight, you would eat more protein. And if you try to lose weight, you would eat less protein. That's why I'm not a big fan of using percentages. Because if I normally eat 3,000 calories, let's say I want to have a 20%. So 20%. So that means, 10%, 300, 600. So that's 600 calories of protein divided by 4. That's 150 grams of protein, right? So if I eat 3,000 calories in a day, it's maintenance. 20% of that is 150 grams of protein. If you don't follow the calculation, don't worry about it. The principle is here. 3,000 calories of food, of which 20% is protein, would be 150 grams of protein. Now I start to lose weight, so I go down to 2,000 calories of maintenance, and I'm still sticking to 20% protein. In this case, that would only be 400 calories, which would, in this case, be 100 grams of protein. Spoiler alert, you do not need less proteins than when you're trying to lose weight. Some people say you need more. I'm kind of skeptical of that. I would usually say hold the same amount of protein. So how do we do this? I'm going to give you guys a short rundown on,
Yes.
I'm just going to give you guys a short rundown. 0.4 grams of protein per kilogram, per kilogram of body weight is for survival, right? If you go under that, you're probably going to get very unhealthy. 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight is for overall health. When you're getting older, like, you know, super old, like 70, 80 years old, stuff like that, you're probably going to need more than this, but it's a nice guideline for overall health. But for those people, you can add a bit more. I would say around 1.2 grams, which is probably, it's very easily achieved for most people. So I would usually stick with this per kilogram of body weight. I'm going to call this overall health plus. Also for endurance athletes, it's probably good to be on the higher side to prevent muscle loss. For most CrossFitters and stuff, I would go higher, and I would say somewhere around at least 105. Intense sports, CrossFit. And you usually want to be between 1.6 and 1.8 grams. Building, maintaining muscle. Going higher than this is possible, but for a lot of people, probably overkill. This is the guidelines I usually stick to with most people. And if you are vegan, you do 20% higher. Some people say 25 to 30%. I've never actually read the studies where they tested that out. So, but for a lot of people, it's hard to get in so much protein. So I would say at least 20% more than these numbers, possibly up to 30% more. So that means if I weigh 80 kilos and I do a lot of CrossFit, but I don't really care about building muscle and I don't want to worry too much about it, 80 kilos body weight means 120 grams of protein. But because I'm a vegan, I am going to add 24 more grams. That's 144 grams of protein. So an 80 kilo vegan who does CrossFit and intense sports, but doesn't really worry too much about muscle mass, just about some decent recovery, somewhere around there. 144 grams of protein as a minimum. More is fine. Just wouldn't go too far below it. More questions?
Yeah, I'm going to do this one first because it relates to this. So eating so much protein related to carbs and fat is not bad at all.
Define bad, or why it is bad. You might have to elaborate on that question, because what I think you're saying is it bad eating a lot of protein compared to carbs and fats? No, it's not. It's only when you have a deficiency in one of them. So if you eat more protein and that results in eating less fat, it could become a problem if at some point you hardly eat any fat at all and you need some fat to survive and to actually function. So it could be bad if it means you do not eat enough fat, for example. But other than that, eating so much protein compared to carbs and fat, it's not necessarily an issue.
Okay.
More questions?
Do you calculate your grams of protein on body weight or muscle mass?
Usually on body weight, because it's a lot more easy. It's a lot easier. Doing it on muscle mass could, in theory, be more accurate. The problem is you often don't know how much muscle mass you have because it's hard to measure. You know, the bioimpedance things like where you hold it or you stand on top of a scale and it tells you how much body fat you have. It's super inaccurate. And even if it is accurate, any water weight you hold is counted into the muscle mass you have. So it's still not very accurate, or regardless of whatever way you look at it. The only time when I deviate from these numbers if someone is very obese, because in those cases you will have such extreme deviations that I revert to a different method. But honestly, I'm not too worried about the exact number of proteins then, because if someone is seriously obese, we need to focus on something else, getting that person fit, you know, like physically fit, and having a proper relationship with food and some good habits. And from there, we can take a look at more specific stuff. But if someone is super obese and has issues with nutrition, the last thing I'm going to worry about is if it's exactly 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So yeah, I usually work with body weight. If you could do it on a muscle mass, you could. I don't know the exact numbers for that because I've never met anyone where I thought it was very beneficial to be that detailed about it. But yeah, that's it. More?
Yeah, really nice one. I think is a beautiful one to end on, if no one else has any other questions, of course, which is, if you could name up to 3 key points we would all remember from the last 3 Monday nights, what would they be?
That is a very difficult one. I think point 1 would be let science, the system, be the leading factor in what you do, and not opinions and feelings and gurus and all that sort of stuff. That's 1. 2, emphasize a healthy relationship with food consistently before anything else, no matter what. The exception, if there's an exception, you will know, because then we're talking about someone who has severe health issues. Then you might have a different focus. You know, then you might have to do some crash diet because you absolutely have to. We see this in medical situations where people are too obese to undergo certain surgery, but then you'll know, and someone will tell you. In general, emphasize the healthy relationship with food and consistency in that. I think those 2 are actually the 2 key points. I don't think there is a 3rd key point, because all the other ones fall under these 2. Yeah, I would stick with those 2. Let science be the guiding factor and focus on a healthy relationship with food on a consistent basis before you start focusing on all the other stuff. Maybe as a 3rd point, I could say like, hey, take a moment to think what's truly important to you and work from there. Because I can say, oh yeah, you need 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight for CrossFit. They're like, yeah, but I just enjoy doing CrossFit. I don't really care about optimal recovery and performance and all that. You know, then suddenly those numbers don't mean a lot anymore. So the physiology is super interesting and stuff, but honestly, it doesn't really matter that much for most people. So yeah, I would stick with those 2 other things: science, healthy relationship with food.
Okay, we got one more, which is nice.
Cool.
The measurement of fat mass. Some classes you mentioned we could go a bit deeper. Of course, we won't use bioimpedance to measure. So what is a way to measure fat mass? I think it's a question.
Well, actually measuring fat mass, you would have to do something like a DEXA scan, where they look at your whole body and they kind of like X-ray right through you so they can see what happens in your body. But if we're talking about, you know, trying to lose fat, like measuring fat loss, if that is the actual question, then I would say measure your body weight consistently and look for trends. Do not look for a specific number, look for the trend, because you can always have deviations for building muscle mass, holding water, that sort of stuff. Or even the amount of food that's in your bowels. Like if you eat something that's very slow digesting late in the evening, it could still be in your bowels in the morning. So keep that one in mind as well. Body weight, look for trends. Measuring tape, waist, belly button height, hips. It depends, but these are the three I usually look for because it's fairly easy to measure. However, if you're already very lean, then measuring at the belly button isn't going to work because you're not going to lose more fat there because it's already like super flat and lean. But it's another way to work. You could even add things like thighs, upper arms, upper back, chest, especially if you're looking for muscle mass. But especially women who have more fat around the legs could also measure their legs. But keep in mind that, of course, it's not fail-safe because you could build muscle in your legs. And of course, then you're not going to lose inches there as fast. You know. But you can at least do these three, possibly with other ones, and then add all the numbers up. Do that like once every 2 weeks and add all the numbers, and the numbers should also show a trend. DEXA scans, but they cost a few dozen euros to do it, so it's more accurate. If you're worried about aesthetics, take pictures. Make sure that picture consistent lighting, consistent clothes. So if you're wearing bikini or, which I would usually do, if you're wearing a bikini or if you're wearing specific shorts, make sure you wear the same ones every single time, same angles. Take it once every week or 2 weeks. Week is probably a bit overkill. 2 weeks is probably better. Because none of these measurement methods are very accurate, but doing several ones can give a more objective image in total. But for body weight, that's usually the one I look for because it's not very reliable in the specific number, but it's very reliable in terms of trends. Because some are like, yeah, but you're going to build muscle when you do strength training. No one ever is going to build so much muscle that you're not going to lose any weight if your goal is losing weight. Right? Even when you're using steroids, that's like a super exceptional case. And if you have the genetics for it, then it is possible that you build muscle faster than you lose fat, assuming that your nutrition is aimed at it. But in general, no, you're not going to build muscle that fast. You can hold a lot of water. So what some people do is weigh yourself every day and take the average at the end of the week. But it's only good if you have a good relationship with the scale. If you're going to step on the scale and you're going to be stressed and anxious over it, or you're going to cry every time you step on the scale, please don't do it because you're just going to cause yourself more stress for not that much extra results. Cool. More questions?
Are bioimpedance measures not accurate,
No.
even if you measure a lot?
No.
Always at the same time, no drinking or training beforehand?
No. I'm going to look up the numbers because I think I should have it here. I made a screenshot of it a while back. There was a guy who showed a, let me see. There was a guy who looked up studies and he looked at the exact deviations, like how far do all these methods deviate from the actual norm. So there's a golden standard, and the golden standard is where they measure your body fat in 4 different ways, like underwater weighing even. It's where they actually weigh you and then put you underwater on the scale, and because muscle is more dense and fat is less dense than water, that's another way. And they actually do 4 different elaborate methods to measure it. And then they look at, okay, which of these methods, how much do they deviate from the actual golden standard? And the bad news was they all deviate a lot. I can't seem to find it very quickly. I'd have to see if I can look it up somewhere. But off the top of my head, some of those actually, when I think the bioimpedance measure, when done for a group, so because everyone has deviations up and deviations down, so the deviations when looking at big groups was something like 3 to 6% or something, and for an individual it could go up to 10-15% differences. So that is super inaccurate. Now, when it comes to measuring with other methods like the DEXA scan, On an individual level, there was still some deviation, still something like 5 to 8% or something, but still way less. And for a group, they could get as close to less than 2% in a lot of cases. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was something like that. So I would certainly take a look at not using bioimpedance meters and finding a different alternative. Because even if you're very consistent about it, eating more or less salt or carbohydrates can still have a negative effect on the day after, because your hormones and your whole water regulation works over the course of a few days. That's why when you want to lose water weight for a competition or something, you often have a protocol that lasts a whole week, because there is so much influence there. And stress also has a factor. So even if you're like super punctual about your water intake and salt intake, being stressed either physically or mentally can also have a big impact. Training also causes stress. You can get inflammation in the muscle, which means you hold more water inside the muscle, and you still don't have an accurate number, because it's only some extra water in the muscle and not actual protein in the muscle. So yeah, don't do it. More questions?
I think this was it.
Cool. We've already gone way over time. Thank you for your attention, people. And once again, if you guys have any questions regarding all this, simply send me a message on jeremy@unscaredcrossfit.com. If you have questions that are not related to this stuff, so maybe any other nutrition questions, like where can I learn more, you recommend any books, stuff like that, you could also send me an email, but also you could also use your private coach if you're trained at UnScared, right? No more questions?
Nothing.
All right. I'm going to thank you guys for your attention and for sticking with me for all 3 webinars, for most of you guys. And I hope you guys learned something. If you guys have any feedback, obviously super welcome. Always looking to improve the stuff we're actually doing. No, I'm not going to shave, by the way, before anyone starts on that. But aside from that, yes, thank you for your attention. And thank you for all the thank yous that are raining in.
Thank you, guys.
I wish you the best of luck with whatever you're going to do with this information. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Don't forget to wash your hands.
Oh, such good question reading.